So I've never watched Yu Yu Hakusho before. Me and a friend of mine, we take some time to watch some anime, and we have this list that we're crossing off out of a book. We've been knocking away at these shows for quite a while. Recently, we finished my favorite anime, The World God Only Knows. You should really check it out, it's great. And now we're moving on to his favorite anime. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to track my progress as we watch this show and see how I feel about each arc. The only thing I know about this is that Yusuke is a spirit detective, and apparently there's an arc called the Dark Tournament, which is the best arc in the entire series. Editing Spark here, just popping in to let you guys know that the video style kind of changes when we get to the 4 Saint Beasts. I went with a style that I thought was cool, but it didn't really stick, so rather than just re-recording the whole thing, I think I'm just gonna stick with what I have and just move on from there. Better to have a video that may be flawed but done, rather than one that's just constantly in production to make sure it's perfect. So we get introduced to Yusuke, who's a delinquent. He has a friend of his, Keiko, who's trying to get him to show up to school, and everyone's afraid of him because they think he's some hardcore gangster, but Keiko actually knows that he's not a real threat to anyone. He does get harassed by one of these teachers that just has it out for him, who I will refer to as King Bradley, because he's voiced by the late Ed Blaylock, the same man who voiced King Bradley in both versions of Full Metal Alchemist.
I see. Yusuke was beating you two up for your wallets. Typical scum behavior.
I am curious about your steel arm and leg and your brother's armor body. Is there any connection between the two?
He leaves school evading a principal with a fake ear trick. Later he beats up a guy named Kuwabara who tries to jump him with his goons. But as soon as Yusuke puts hands and feet on Kuwabara, the goons really nope out of that one. We get to see his home life, and it seems he has a mother who just doesn't give a shit. Like, her son just comes home in the middle of a school day and she's like, well, if you're not gonna go to school, just go and get a job, and just lays there. We see Yusuke try to make some kid laugh after he gives his ball back to him because he's playing soccer on the sidewalk. After that, he kicks the ball right back into the road and tries to retrieve it, completely unaware of the oncoming vehicle that's about to hit him. Yusuke pushes him out of the way and gets hit by a car. He has an out-of-body experience kind of similar to that movie Ghost Dad, and he meets up with this girl Botan, who informs him that yes, you are dead. Botan is the Grim Reaper and informs Yusuke that he actually died for nothing. If Yusuke actually did nothing in that situation, the car would have actually swerved out of the way, missing the kid. Kinda reminds me of another scene I've seen somewhere. But Botan offers Yusuke a second chance at life since they didn't expect him to die. But Yusuke thinks that with him dead, everyone else in his life will be better off. So Botan leaves, giving him time to think, but recommends him to visit his home. That night, Yusuke goes back to his home, seeing that they have a funeral for him. Okay, I understand that this is just so the story can happen, but I really can't ignore stuff like this. Yusuke is hit by a car and pronounced dead because he was carted off by the ambulance, and the same day, they have a funeral for him. That's already crazy, but it gets even worse when we find out future things, so I'll just save that for later. At the funeral, Yusuke sees a lot of his classmates. He sees Keiko in hysteria, he sees his mom is mostly unresponsive. Even Kuwabara, the guys whose ass he kicked not a few hours ago, shows up. And his response is easily the most moving. And then those 2 piece of shit teachers show up again at his funeral. I'm gonna say it right now, both of these teachers need their asses whooped. How is it that you show up to the funeral of a middle schooler just to talk shit in front of his friends and grieving mother? See, there's a word between disrespectful and evil that perfectly describes this, and I can't seem to find it. Answer in the comments what word you think that is. Even the principal shows up after telling off those teachers. Then the boy that Yusuke saved and his mother go to the funeral to pay respects, and we see his mother finally start crying. The son even asks if he can play with that man next time. Because he's a kid, he can't even conceptualize death. It was this scene right here that I think is the most important. Is that we were watching this, and honestly I could feel the emotions swell up. But to my left, I could hear my friend crying, and at that point, I really understood. Yusuke seeing that all of these people in his life who genuinely cared about him, even though he didn't see it himself, it's very heartwarming. And unfortunately, it required him dying for him to finally realize it. Getting hit with the cold-faced reality that there are people who actually do care about you and don't want to see you gone. This is probably just me, but this type of stuff really speaks to me. This is why Everything Everywhere All at Once became my favorite movie of 2022. What this did was confirm that I have to finish this series. Even if it turns to shit or becomes uneventful later on, I have to finish this. I was able to see a small glimpse of what I assume is the emotional core that will be underpinning most of the stuff that happens in this show. At least I hope so. And this is even reinforced by the lyrics of the intro. Yes, the dub intro, don't care. Making a song that, when I first heard it, I originally didn't care much for it until I decided to look into the lyrics. Making this song go from a 3 to about a 7. But aside from that, Botan offers Yusuke this opportunity to get his life back, and takes him to the spirit world to meet King Yama, ending the first episode. Now, I spent a good chunk of time just talking about the first episode in detail, but I'm not going to do this for the rest of the show. Episode 2, he goes to the spirit world and meets this King Yama, or Koenma is what they call him here. He gives him a golden egg that he's supposed to hatch, and that will allow him to get his body back. But they have to also make sure his body doesn't get cremated. But he's unable to interact with people directly since he's a spirit, so he has to go possess the body of that guy Kuwabara that showed up, because he's in tune with the spiritual world or something like that. He ends up finding his friend Keiko and delivers the message to please keep my body preserved, because I'm gonna come back. Keiko goes back to his house, and his mom reports that he actually is starting to come back. His body's slightly warm, his heart's beating, his skin has color. Maybe that funeral we had for him in episode 1 was a bit premature if his body started to come back. Episode 3 is where we focus on Kuwabara. Basically, he has to pass a test and not get into any fights so one of his goons can keep a job that he needs to support his family. And Kuwabara, being a real one, lets himself get beat up by those gangs he had previously beat up earlier, and he had also started studying so he could make sure he could pass his test, all just to help one of his friends. Yusuke goes into his dreams and even helps him study there, because that's an ability he has now. The next day, that gang that Kuwabara let beat him up, they try to appear for round 2, leading to a funny scene where Yusuke possesses a girl and beats them up himself. Unfortunately, one of those awful teachers decided to set him up by erasing one of his answers, because he actually had passed it. Kuwabara was going to rightfully deck this guy, but it would erase all the good that he's done so far, so he opts not to. Luckily, the principal is here and puts the teacher in his place. Still raising that question about why you would have a teacher like that employed at your school, but okay. This next episode is just an advertisement for why you shouldn't keep clutter in your home, because Yusuke's mom just fucking leaves with all this trash everywhere.
You don't seem to have a very responsible parent.
Very observant.
And someone tries to set his fucking house on fire. So Keiko, being a real one, goes inside the burning building to retrieve his body. Kuwabara helps too, but they get trapped inside there, so Yusuke opts to sacrifice that golden egg to create a pathway for them to get out safely. Him sacrificing his one opportunity to come back to life only just to save his friends proves to Koenma that he's definitely worthy and allows him to come back, as long as someone he has some relation to plants a kiss on him before midnight. Keiko plants the kiss on him, and now Yusuke is back, on the condition that he acts as a spirit detective. His first outing does not go very well. He gets framed by Bradley for stealing something, fights a demon that's stealing the souls of children to eat them, and gets absolutely folded, though he's able to run it back, and he does beat him this time with an item Botan gave him. And he was taking an item that he was using that he needs to now collect more of. The next one being a mirror that can grant any wish, being used by a spirit named Karama. This was a spirit who was born as the son of a family. The mother is sick and isn't expected to pull through, so Karama's planning to use that mirror to save her life at the expense of his own. Yusuke, not wanting to see another mother mourn her son like he did for his, offers his life as an exchange for Karama being able to get his wish. This noble act is able to recover Karama's mother without taking a life, securing the second item. Gonna be honest, I don't really care for this next episode at all. A demon named Hiei uses Keiko as a hostage to convince Yusuke to give him the other items. They fight, Karama takes a hit for Yusuke, and Yusuke beats him. My friend was telling me I'm gonna have to disregard most of the stuff that Hiei does in this episode because he was originally meant to be a one-time villain, but came back due to popular demand. This episode's fine, I just really wasn't feeling it. Next one is the first tournament arc, and this will be ending the first arc that we have. Yusuke has to compete in a competition to be the next disciple of this spirit martial artist, who has a striking resemblance to that witch lady from Dragon Ball. The reason he has to do so is because there's also a demon in that same competition who wants to learn from this same master. Kuwabara is also there as well. They go through 3 trials, one having to draw lots, the other having to play an arcade game, and the other having to go through a forest with demons in it with a time limit attached. After all that, they have the actual tournament part where they have to fight everyone in the dark. Most of these guys are a bit of fodder, but I can't get past this one dude with the swastika on his forehead. I just find that so funny. Kuwabara is able to win his first match by manifesting his spiritual energy into making a spirit sword. Yusuke fights someone who can see him in the dark because he's looking at his spiritual energy. However, Yusuke is able to line up a shot by using a lit cigarette that was on the ground. The next part of the tournament is done outside. Yusuke fights the dude with the swastika on his forehead, and he essentially just beats him with the same way Goku beat Frieza. There's only one guy that's not Yusuke or Kuwabara left in the tournament, so it's deduced that he's the actual demon. Kuwabara fights him, and he's actually able to deflect one of his attacks back at him, but he uses an incantation that shrinks Kuwabara, and he picks him up and just tortures him by breaking his arm. And now in the final round, we're rooting for Yusuke to come kick this dude's ass. He reveals himself as, obviously, the demon, and he has this attack that can do more damage to you if you have any open wounds, and Yusuke just runs into it head first. He tanks the hit, and it allows him to get up close to actually hit the guy. But then he's able to grab Yusuke, and he just tosses him around into trees, and then dangles him over a lake. He shows off by copying Yusuke's spirit gun and using that to plunge him into the swamp. Kuwabara's spirit leaves his body and goes to talk to Yusuke to give him some motivation, and it works because Yusuke is able to break out of his confinements and jump out of the swamp on the other side to land a clean shot on the demon. He tries to use the same incantation he used to shrink Kuwabara, but it doesn't work out well for him. See, you need to actually hear the incantation for it to have any effect on you. However, Yusuke's time from the swamp put some little gunk in his ear so he couldn't actually hear it. So it just Uno reverses on the demon who made the incantation, and Yusuke has enough energy to finish him off with a gravity-powered elbow drop, winning the tournament. And as the winner, Yusuke is forced to stay to undergo this training by the witch lady from Dragon Ball. Now, I thought that this was a pretty alright arc. It started off pretty strong, but really waned when we got to the Hiei and Kurama episodes. I did enjoy that there was a through line where the characters were willing to sacrifice for people they cared about, especially Kuwabara and Kurama. One being with a host family for the purpose of regaining his energy, but was willing to give up his entire life for his host mother, really playing into that lyric about kindness from people you don't even know in the intro. Kuwabara being just like Yusuke, another delinquent that gets into fights, showing he's willing to sacrifice his reputation amongst other gang members when it comes to helping out one of his friends, not wanting him to have to suffer because of his actions. Keiko also shows her dedication. Even when her mother is hospitalized, she ran into a burning building to get Yusuke's body and showed up just in time to plant the kiss that would bring him back to life. Yusuke's mom is there. I will say it is funny to point out how much it looks like she just doesn't care, and she is 100% at fault for just abandoning her comatose son in that dirty ass apartment, and her not being there could have saved everyone a whole lot of trouble. Keiko and Kuwabara wouldn't have had to almost burn to death retrieving Yusuke's body, but I think what we can all agree on is we know exactly how Yusuke turned out the way he did. The tournament itself was alright. There's nothing really bad about it, but there's nothing really good that makes it stand out. To me, it's more like we need this here to show how smart Yusuke and Kuwabara are when it comes to fights, since it looks like fights are going to be more frequent, and to give Kuwabara his new spirit sword before anything major comes up in the future. Speaking of something major coming up in the future, next we have the Four Saint Beasts arc. Just as Yusuke comes back from his training, he has to abandon Keiko because he's pulled right into another job. The Four Saint Beasts have stolen a flute which allows them to possess humans. Yusuke and Kuwabara are sent to the demon world to go retrieve said flute. Kurama and Hiei are also called in as backup, with clearing their criminal records being used as leverage. And we got our first fight with Kurama versus the First Saint Beast, a giant rock monster, and it's trash. My friend told me it was trash, and I see exactly what he's talking about. He can attack by separating his body into smaller rocks that can be used as weapons. So Kurama just grabs a piece of him which is supposed to be a part of his body that regulates how he puts his body back together. What makes this so dumb is that the beast didn't know that this was a part of his body, as he's shocked when Kurama has to explain this to him.
What's that?
Like, nigga, how did you not know this? Anyone with this information could have easily killed you and you'd have been none the wiser. But moving on from that atrocity, we actually get to a good fight with Kuwabara versus the next Saint Beast, a white tiger. And for starters, we have the whole team doubting if Kuwabara can even handle this guy on his own. But all the naysayers start to shut up real quick when he starts neutralizing the minions that he spawns, and he even counters his ability to absorb his spiritual energy by feeding him so much that he pops like a balloon. I'll say it first, right now this dude is my favorite. He is silencing all the haters. But White Tiger's not done, he wants to run round 2. But now they're in a lava pit with a bunch of pillars standing over it. And Kuwabara just jumps from pillar to pillar while the tiger's destroying them, using his sword as a pole vault to get the finishing blow, knocking him back into the fire, finishing the fight for real this time. This is an absolute redemption from what happened to him in that first tournament. Bro said running back, and now Kuwabara is 2 for 2. Next up is Hiei's fight, but we're not going to talk about that because it actually takes the party longer to get to the fight than the actual fight itself. So instead we'll be using this opportunity to talk about what's going on back in the real world. Botan is staying behind trying to keep a handle on all the humans that are getting possessed. She's also lugging around Keiko since Yusuke asked her to watch her while he's gone. But in that time, the situation has grown exponentially worse, with the two just on the run from all these possessed humans. And now it's time for Yusuke. The others stay behind to fight some goons, but Yusuke goes on ahead to fight the head of the Saint Beasts, Suzaku. And the fight is pretty alright. He has the whistle, which is controlling all of the possessed humans, and has a constant feed on Botan and Keiko running for their lives. Yusuke takes some bad hits, but he's able to get in one of his own. Then Suzaku uses a special move that essentially allows him to torture Yusuke while he watches Keiko and Botan supposedly die. Unfortunate for him, they were actually able to juke the possessed humans, so Suzaku just decides to kill Yusuke, and he gets a flashback to his training, where the witch lady asked him to focus on what he truly cares about. And it shows a montage of his mother, Kuwabara, Keiko, Kurama, and some fucking how Hiei is here, as if the last interaction you had with this nigga wasn't him kidnapping Keiko, trying to make her his slave. Like, I'm supposed to believe that in this short amount of time you built up enough of a rapport that you actually give a shit about him now. But him wanting to protect his friends gives him this surge in power, which allows him to do an explosive wave. And he does this thing where, at least how Suzaku puts it, he sacrifices a portion of his life just to increase his power and do one shotgun blast that allows him to finish off the fight and destroy the flute, saving Keiko and Botan. Back after everything is said and done, Kuwabara pulls this nasty ass prank when Yusuke wakes up, asking how Keiko and Botan were doing. He goes and makes a face like, "Well, Urameshi, there's bad news for ya," only for Yusuke to act distressed cause he wants answers, and then the two of them just walk through the front door. Yusuke would be in the right if he whooped Kuwabara's ass after something like that. But after that, we get some alone time between Yusuke and Keiko, where she asks him, the next time you have to run off like that, tell me the truth. And that's the end of the 4 Saint Beasts. I'm not gonna lie, these are the most one-note villains I've seen in quite a while. They're essentially just walls in the form of a person. I could be more harsh on this, but this is a what? Mid to late 80s shonen? I think this is a bit unfair to expect standards that I may have for stuff now, for stuff back then where this is probably what the audiences wanted. To be honest, most of the growth I've seen has just been from Kuwabara, which is great. Togashi really wants you to like this guy. Unfortunately, it seems to be just him. I like Yusuke, but I would like to see him get more growth than just him getting a new power. And I don't really see what this arc did for him that we didn't already do. He cares for his friends. We knew that already based upon what happened before this. Kurama and Hiei also don't get much at all. Kurama's got easily the worst fight I've seen so far, and Hiei's just a plank of wood. Though I will admit that Yusuke having his montage about what he truly cares about wouldn't have hit as hard if we didn't have that build-up from the first couple of episodes, so there's still some heart here. But that's where I'm gonna end it off here. Hopefully by the time this gets uploaded, I'll be well into watching the next arc. In the meantime, like and subscribe for more. I'm Mr. SP, thank you for watching and see you next time.